Today I'm going to be talking about our 12 volt Bushman compressor fridge. We've had this installed in our off-grid Mercedes camper for around 7 months now. In that time we've done over 20,000 Ks in our trip across Australia. I'm going to talk briefly around the specs, how much power it uses, how it's been working for us, issues we've had, and what the warranty process is like because we've had to make use of that. So our fridge is the DC130X. It's 130 litre capacity, which includes 124 litres of fridge space and 6 litres of freezer space. It runs on either 12 volt or 24 volt. Ours has been running on 12 volt. It draws between 2 amps and 4.5 amps at 12 volt, although across a 24-hour period the average consumption is 1.4 amps per hour because it's not running all the time. So we've found those power figures to be relatively accurate. We custom built the cupboard here to go around the fridge. The manuals are online. They've got all the specs there for the sizes that you need as well as the ventilation requirements, so that made that super easy, and we're able to custom build the cupboard before we'd even bought the fridge. Alrighty, moving on to the fridge itself. It's powder coated steel in black. It's got a reversible door so you can have it open this way, which we've got, or you can have it open the other way as well. It's got this little plastic latch here which feels kind of flimsy and plasticky, sort of a bit cheap, but in saying that, it hasn't come open on us at all, and it has held up pretty well. It works and keeps the door securely closed. Inside the fridge there's 3 shelves. We've actually only got 2 shelves in there. We've taken a third one out because with 3 shelves in there we found that our shelf heights were actually quite low and it felt like it restricted how much we could fit in. So with only having the 2 shelves in, for us it's working a lot better. The shelves also have an adjustable flap in there, so I guess you can fit bottles and things, but that's not something that we've ever really made use of. There's a crisper at the bottom for veggies. That's a nice feature to have. Like the plastic handle, it feels plasticky and cheap, but we haven't had any issues with it and it's been holding up fine. There's plenty of storage options in the doors. The lower part actually holds 2 litres of milk. We normally have 2 2-litre bottles in the door. Sometimes we'll have a third 2-litre bottle in the bottom of the fridge as well. We tend to go through a fair bit of milk. There's some little dividers in the door as well that help hold things in place, like milk bottles and jars and things. And then further up on the door there's some slots that are perfectly designed to hold cans, so you can fit a 6-pack across the door, and then there's a little bit more storage space at the top of the door as well. In the top left there's a little freezer, 6 litres. It's got a little door to access it. That's not meant to come off. I'll talk about that later. It's quite small and it's probably not the best freezer. I probably wouldn't want to keep anything like frozen meat in there for any length of time, but it is nice to have. We do just tend to keep ice cubes and frozen berries and things like that in the freezer. In terms of food storage, for the 2 of us, we can get a good week's worth of food in there. We haven't been shopping for about 5 days now, or 6 days, so we're running pretty low. So when we do a full shop, that'll fit in there easily. And I wouldn't say that we've been longing for extra space or anything like that. I'm glad we went with the size that we did. I think we'd probably start to feel a little bit limited if we had a smaller fridge. The fridge also holds the food pretty well, and what I mean by that is we've never opened the door after a trip and had food fall out. In saying that, it is a 2-wheel drive van and we haven't done anything super rough with it. A few corrugated roads, but it has been fine and nothing has been sort of fallen out or broken. I will say that even with one of the shelves out, we've found that it isn't particularly practical for larger food items, so something like a full iceberg lettuce or half a watermelon or something like that. Alright, so what we like about the fridge, it cools very quickly. If you've had this off and you turn it on, within sort of 10 to 15 minutes it'll pretty much be cold. It works very quickly in that regard. It uses very little power. It holds quite a reasonable amount of food and it's really practical for accessing that food. You're sort of not digging down like you would be in a chest fridge to get food at the bottom. It's really easy to access everything, and it seems to hold food in place pretty well while we're driving as well. Alrighty, so what don't I like about the fridge? The biggest one is that the freezer frosts up so quickly. I'd say we have to defrost it every 3 to 4 weeks. Even now you can see there's a bit of frost built up on the freezer. It's probably been about 2 weeks since I defrosted that. On the positive note, it's not a massive job to defrost it, but it is a real pain that that happens so frequently. I'm not sure if this is something that's just common with these built-in freezers in these smaller fridges. In saying that, it's not a massive job to defrost it. What we normally do is just put a couple of bowls of warm water in the freezer, take the door off, and then put a collapsible bucket on the top shelf, fold it up, and then just peel the ice off. But yeah, it can build up frost pretty heavily, especially in the warmer climates in North Queensland, the Northern Territory, and Western Australia. We've noticed it to be worse than the cooler areas. The other thing that we didn't like was the freezer door. It was quite flimsy and it actually broke after maybe 2 months of use. In my opinion, it's quite poorly designed and it's got quite a weak point there in the hinge design. And the reason I think it broke is the frosting issue that it has, and frost building up around where the freezer door sits, and then when you go to open the freezer, it's putting extra stress on the hinge point. The good news on that front was I contacted Bushman's and they were pretty responsive and express shipped out a new door to us. In the emails that they sent though, they did sort of imply that this was my fault, saying that most of the time the door breaks because people leave it open. I think some of the older models had a magnet that would hold it up, which ours doesn't have, so that's definitely not what happened. And they did say as well that the frost buildup can contribute to it, so I think that's a bit of an admission on their part around the design and the frosting. My takeaway from that response is that this happens pretty regularly. And the last thing I don't particularly like is the price point. Obviously you know what you're getting into when you're buying it and no one is forcing you to, but it is still quite a steep price point and there are definitely cheaper options out there. Well, hopefully this video helps you out in your hunt for a fridge for your van or your four-wheel drive. Oh, the flies. Flies. Flies.